There's a 15-minute window in your morning. Most people don't even know it exists, and it might be the single most powerful opportunity you have to actually get better at English. Not a class, not a textbook. 15 minutes. And almost everyone listening to this is wasting it right now.
And here's the strange part. You're not wasting it because you're lazy. You're wasting it because nobody ever told you what it's actually worth.
Welcome. I'm David.
And I'm Sarah, and what we're about to get into, this is going to reframe how you think about your mornings entirely, not just for English, for your whole day.
We're going to walk through a real, honest look at what happens in those first moments after your alarm goes off and show you a different way to use that time. Something small, something that fits inside your actual life, not some imaginary, perfect version of it. And by the end of this conversation, you'll have something concrete, something you can actually do tomorrow morning.
Stay with us, because there's a moment toward the end of this episode, a truth about how language actually gets into your brain that genuinely changed the way we think about learning, and we really want you to hear it.
Let me paint you a picture. It's early. Your alarm goes off, and before you're even fully awake, your hand is already moving. Across the bed, toward your phone. And within about 30 seconds of opening your eyes, you're deep inside someone else's world. Someone's argument on social media, a news headline that unsettles you, a video that autoplay decided you needed to see. And just like that, your morning is already running on someone else's fuel.
That is the average morning for most English learners right now. And I'm not saying it to judge anyone. David and I have both been there. But what that kind of start actually does to your brain is something most people never stop to consider. Because here's what's happening. Stay with me on this because it really does matter.
When you wake up, your brain is in a genuinely unusual state. Scientists call it the hypnopompic window, that soft, foggy space between sleeping and being fully awake. During that window, your brain is more open to absorbing new information than almost any other point in the entire day. Your mental defenses are lower, the internal noise is quieter, and whatever you expose yourself to in those early minutes, it doesn't just pass through, it lands differently. It settles deeper.
So when the first thing that lands is someone else's drama, or a flood of notifications, or 10 minutes of scrolling through content you didn't choose, your brain doesn't just waste that window, it actively fills it with noise. And then you spend the rest of the morning, sometimes the rest of the day, trying to think clearly through all that static.
But what if you used that window for English instead? What if the first sound your brain received in the morning was a real, natural English conversation? Not a grammar drill, not a memorization exercise, just real, flowing human English. The kind your brain can actually absorb when it's in that wide-open, receptive state.
That's the idea at the center of everything we're going to talk about today. And it sounds simple, almost too simple, but there's a real reason it works, and we're going to get there. First, though, let's talk about why so many learners keep failing to build any kind of consistent English habit at all, because the reason is probably not what you think it is.
I don't have time. That's the most common thing we hear. From listeners, from people in comments, from learners who write to us with so much genuine frustration in their words. And I want to be really honest about this because I think it's worth looking at closely. Because here's what I've noticed after talking to so many English learners over the years. When someone says, "I don't have time for English," what they almost always mean underneath that is something slightly different.
What they actually mean is, English doesn't feel urgent enough yet. And that is a completely human response. We make time for the things that feel urgent. We find time for the show we're watching. We find time to scroll. We find time for the things that give us immediate reward. English, when you're in the slow middle of learning it, doesn't always give you that immediate reward, so it keeps getting pushed down the list, day after day, week after week.
But here's the thing, and this is genuinely important. The people who do get fluent, the ones who actually cross that line from struggling and hesitant to confident and natural, they don't always have more time than you. They just stopped waiting for a large block of time that was never going to arrive. They started doing something small, every single morning, without making a big production out of it.
I want to tell you about someone, a woman, we'll call her Mina, who sent us a message about 6 months ago. She works as a nurse, early shifts, late shifts, sometimes doubles. 2 kids at home. By the time she walks back through her front door after a long shift, she can barely put her bag down without sitting on the floor beside it. She'd been trying to improve her English for nearly 3 years. She downloaded the apps, signed up for 2 different courses, bought the workbooks. Nothing stuck because nothing was consistent. Life kept interrupting, motivation kept running dry.
And then she did something very, very small. She stopped trying to carve out new time in her day and started looking at the time that already existed. She had a 17-minute commute to the hospital every single day. 5 days a week, she had been spending it listening to music. One Monday morning, almost on impulse, she switched to an English podcast instead. Just that, nothing else changed. Same commute, same seat, same coffee in her hand, just different audio. 4 months later, she wrote to us and she said her English had moved forward more in those 4 months than in the previous 3 years combined. Not because the podcast was magic, because consistency is magic. 17 minutes, 5 days a week, for 4 months, that's over 20 hours of genuine English immersion. That she didn't have to schedule, that she didn't have to find. It was already there, waiting inside time she was already spending.
So before we go any further, think about your own day for a second. Where are the pockets of time that already exist? The commute, the breakfast, the 10 minutes before you look at your phone, the walk to work. Don't try to create new time, just look honestly at what's already there, because that's where we're going to put your English.
Okay, let's go a little deeper now, because I mentioned the science briefly, and I don't want to move past it too quickly, because once you genuinely understand what's happening in your brain during the morning, you'll never think about this the same way again.
There's a concept in learning psychology called the primacy effect. The basic idea is that the information you encounter first in any given session or any given day is the information you're most likely to remember. Your brain assigns a kind of invisible priority tag to early input. It says, "This came first, it matters, hold on to it."
And what that means practically is that if English is the first thing your mind engages with in the morning, even for 10 minutes, your brain treats it with a level of care and retention that you literally cannot replicate at 9 o'clock at night when you're drained and overstimulated and running on whatever's left in the tank.
There's also something happening emotionally in the morning that people almost never account for. The emotional state you're in when you learn something is deeply tied to how well you remember it. When you're anxious, overwhelmed, or scattered, your brain isn't in storage mode, it's in survival mode. It's just trying to get through. But when you're calm, a little alert, and in a decent headspace, which is exactly what a quiet, unhurried morning can give you, the language you encounter actually settles into long-term memory. It has room to land.
This is why so many learners say, "I know this word, I've seen it so many times, but I can never use it when I actually need it." That's not a memory problem, it's a depth problem. The word never went deep enough to stay. And the morning, that pre-noise, pre-pressure window, is when words go deepest.
So what we're really building here isn't just a morning routine, it's a better relationship between you and the English language, one where your brain actually holds on to what it hears. And the way you build that relationship, it comes down to 4 things. 4 simple, manageable things. None of them require more than about 15 minutes in total.
Here's the framework. And before anything else, the most important thing we want to say about it is this. You don't have to do all 4 parts every single morning. This is not a checklist you fail if you skip something. Think of it more like a toolkit. You pick what fits your morning, what's available, what feels right. The goal is not perfection. The goal is presence.
The 4 parts are listen, speak, write, and review. Each one does something slightly different for your English brain. Let's go through them one at a time.
The first, listen, is where most people should start. And the reason is straightforward. Listening is the most natural thing in language learning. It doesn't require you to perform. It doesn't require you to be correct. You just receive. And for a lot of learners who feel anxious about English, who feel the weight of making mistakes, of sounding foolish, listening is a safe place to begin. You're building your ear without anyone watching.
The key to morning listening is not to study what you're hearing. Don't pause every sentence to look up a word. Don't rewind to catch one phrase you missed. Let it flow. Let the rhythm of the language move through you. Your brain is absorbing patterns even when you're not consciously trying, especially in that soft, early morning state. Trust the process. 10 minutes is enough. While you make coffee, while you get dressed, while you sit at the table before the household wakes up.
The second part, speaking, is where a lot of learners freeze because speaking feels exposed. It feels like there's nowhere to hide. You open your mouth and suddenly every mistake is visible. But in the morning, alone, nobody watching, that exposure becomes a gift because the pressure is gone. And without pressure, your voice finds its way much more easily.
Here's an exercise that sounds almost too simple. Narrate out loud. After you've listened for a few minutes, just describe what you see, what you're doing. I'm standing in my kitchen, the light is coming through the window, I'm going to be late today. Nothing clever, nothing impressive, just your real life in English, spoken out loud. Because the mouth is a muscle, and muscles need their morning warm-up before you ask them to perform.
And here's something that surprised me when I first started doing this. After about 2 weeks of speaking English to yourself every morning, even for just 2 or 3 minutes, your English and actual conversations starts to feel more automatic. Words come a fraction of a second faster. The hesitation shortens. Because you've been warming up the engine every morning, and a warm engine runs better.
The third part, writing, serves a slightly different purpose. It's not about grammar, it's about thinking. There's a crucial gap in English learning between the people who translate in their head and the people who actually think in English. Writing in the morning, even 3 sentences, even imperfectly, starts to close that gap.
Write about anything, what you dreamed, what your day looks like, something you're feeling. The point is not to impress anyone. The point is to practice the move from a thought directly to English, without stopping halfway through to swap into your native language. That direct channel, thought to English, that's what fluency actually is. And this is how you start building it.
And the fourth part, review, is the one most people skip, and it might be the most important of all, because here's an uncomfortable truth about vocabulary. You don't really learn a word the first time you meet it. You don't even learn it the third time. Researchers who study memory and language have found that most words need meaningful, spaced contact somewhere between 7 and 12 times before they genuinely move into your long-term vocabulary and stay there.
Which means if you hear a new word, feel good about it in the moment, and then never encounter it again, it vanishes, usually within 48 hours. But if you spend just 5 minutes each morning glancing back at words and phrases you've recently met, a note on your phone, a sentence you wrote down, a phrase from yesterday's podcast, those words start to anchor. They stop slipping away.
Review is the act of watering the seeds you've already planted. Skip it, and the garden keeps starting over. Do it, and the garden keeps growing, even when it's slow, even when you can't see it.
Okay, we're about halfway through this conversation, and I have a feeling some of you are thinking, this sounds great, but I've heard this kind of advice before. I've tried building habits before. They fall apart. They always fall apart.
That's fair. That's an honest reaction. And it's actually exactly what I want to address right now, because there's a specific reason most English routines don't stick, and it has nothing to do with willpower or commitment, or how much you actually want to improve. When you hear what it really is, it changes how you approach this entirely.
The reason most routines collapse, not just English routines, but most habits in general, is that people build them for the best version of their day, not the real version.
Think about it. You decide you're going to start a morning English routine, so you picture it. You imagine a calm morning where there's enough time, where the kids sleep in, where nothing unexpected happens, where you wake up feeling rested and actually motivated, and you design your routine for that morning, because that's the morning where it feels possible.
But that morning shows up maybe twice a month. The other 28 days, real life arrives instead. You're exhausted, something's already going wrong before 9. The morning is chaos and noise and hurrying. And because your routine was designed for the ideal, it collapses the second the ideal doesn't show up, which is almost always.
The fix is simple, but it requires a real shift in thinking. Design your routine for your worst morning, not your best one. Genuinely ask yourself, on the most tired, most rushed, most chaotic morning I can imagine, what is the one thing I could still do? Just one.
For some people, that's 3 minutes of listening while they're in the bathroom. For others, it's writing one sentence in their phone notes on the way out the door. For others, it's saying 5 phrases out loud in the car. Whatever it is, that is your baseline. That is your minimum, and you commit to that. On the hard days, on the easy days, on the days you feel like it, and the days you absolutely don't.
Because here's what consistent small habits actually build over time, and this is the insight we were moving toward. When you do something every single day, even something tiny, your brain starts to reclassify that thing. It stops being something you're trying to do. It becomes something you just do. The way you brush your teeth. Nobody sits and thinks about whether they feel motivated to brush their teeth this morning. They just do it because it becomes part of who they are.
Language researchers call this identity-based learning, and it's dramatically more powerful than goal-based learning. Goal-based learning says, I want to reach a higher level of English by the end of the year. Identity-based learning says, I am someone who does English in the morning. And when English becomes part of your identity, not something on your to-do list, the habit becomes almost self-sustaining. You stop needing to convince yourself to do it.
The people who get fluent are not always the most talented people in the room. They're not always the most motivated. They are the ones who found a way to make English feel like something they simply are, not something they're still trying to become.
I want to zoom out for a moment, because sometimes when you're deep in the work of it, the routines, the vocabulary, the effort of showing up every morning, it's easy to lose sight of why any of this matters. And I think that question deserves a real answer.
Why English? Why put this kind of quiet, sustained effort into a language? And the answer is different for everyone, but under all the different answers, there tends to be the same thing. English, more than almost anything else, is access. It's a door, and behind that door is a version of the world that is significantly larger and more open than what's available without it.
Think about the things you can't fully reach yet. The podcasts, the books, the online courses, the job listings, the conversations with people from completely different parts of the world, the ability to travel somewhere and not feel helpless or invisible, the ability to be in a professional situation and actually say what you mean, quickly, clearly, with confidence, instead of watching the moment pass while you search for the right words.
That last one, I hear it constantly. I know what I want to say, I just can't get it out fast enough. That gap between what you know and what you can actually express is one of the most quietly exhausting places a person can live. It makes you feel smaller than you are. It makes you hold back in situations where you have something real to contribute.
And what we're building together, this morning practice, this small, quiet commitment, it slowly closes that gap. Not in a week, not even in a month, but over time you will look back at who you were before and barely recognize them.
There's a specific kind of confidence that comes from knowing you can handle English in real situations. It's not arrogance, it's more like steadiness, like the ground beneath you is solid and you can step forward without bracing for a fall. That's what this builds, steadiness, over time, morning by morning.
Here's the thing that nobody really talks about when it comes to learning English, or any language. The actual moment of progress doesn't feel like progress when it's happening. It doesn't feel like anything.
It happens quietly, below the surface, on some ordinary Tuesday morning when you're half awake, listening to English while your coffee brews, not really trying to absorb anything. Your brain is still working, still sorting, still connecting, storing things you didn't even consciously notice. And then one day, weeks or months later, you're in a real situation, a conversation, a meeting, a moment that would have stopped you cold before, and the words just come, and you don't even fully understand why it feels so much easier than it used to.
That's not luck. That's not a sudden burst of talent. That is the accumulation of every single small, quiet morning working together underneath the surface. You couldn't see it happening, but it was happening. Every day you showed up, even half-heartedly, even for 5 minutes, even when it felt pointless, something was building.
And the people who give up, they almost always give up right before something starts to shift, because progress in language is invisible for a long time, and invisible progress feels like no progress, and no progress feels like proof that it isn't working, so they stop.
Don't stop. If there's one thing to carry out of this conversation, that's it. Don't stop. Keep showing up in your morning. Keep doing the small thing. Because the small thing, done enough times, becomes something you couldn't have imagined when you started.
I want you to sit with something for a moment. Think about where you want your English to be in 1 year. Not 5 years from now, not someday. 1 year from today. What do you want to be able to do that you can't fully do right now? Have a conversation without that tight, panicky feeling in your chest? Watch a film and actually understand everything without needing subtitles. Write something in English and feel proud of it instead of unsure. Whatever it is, hold that picture.
Now think about this. 1 year from today, 365 mornings will have passed. In each of those mornings, you'll have made a choice. You'll have chosen what to do with those first quiet minutes before the day took over. Those choices, stacked one on top of another, are going to determine whether you're still in the same place you are right now or somewhere genuinely different.
You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to arrive at your morning routine with energy and enthusiasm every day. You don't need to be motivated. Motivation, honestly, is overrated. What matters is the habit, the quiet, unglamorous act of doing the small thing again, even when you don't want to, especially when you don't want to.
Because the version of you 1 year from now, the one who speaks with more ease, who understands without panic, who feels solid when English shows up in your life, that person got built in mornings. Not in one morning, in many, many quiet, ordinary mornings, starting with tomorrow.
So tomorrow, when the alarm goes off, before your hand reaches for the phone, give yourself 60 seconds. 1 sentence spoken out loud, 1 minute of listening, 1 deliberate choice in a language you're choosing to grow in. That's enough to start. That's all it takes to begin.
And if you keep that promise, if you keep showing up day after day, morning after morning, we'll be right here. In your kitchen, on your commute, in those quiet minutes before the world gets loud.
Because this isn't really about us, it's about who you're in the middle of becoming, and we think that person is worth every single morning you give them.
If this conversation stayed with you, if one idea from today is still sitting somewhere in your mind, you already know what to do with it.
And if you want to keep walking with us, we'll be here for the next one.